Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming all of you guys here at the temple. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. This is our group learning program where each Sunday and Wednesday I come together with students, helping them to understand the path to enlightenment. We do this at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. on Sunday and Wednesday. And what we do is slowly but surely help students to understand the path to enlightenment that the Buddha taught, where the mind can be completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. Each Sunday I go chapter by chapter in this book. It's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This week we're in chapter 23, which is titled Symbolism of Teachings, Reminders Through Imagery. This is where you learn about the symbols that are in Buddhist artwork, architecture, and symbolism, where you'll be able to visit temples and see artwork, and it'll have more meaning for you because these temples all throughout Thailand, they were created about 500 to 1,000 years ago. And the artists at that time, they were embedding the teachings of the Buddha into the temples, and nowadays even artists do this in their Buddhist artwork. And if you understand the language that they're speaking, you can actually understand what it is that they're communicating to you. So I'm going to go through many of the common symbols that you're going to see in Buddhist artwork, architecture, in temples. And then when you visit temples, they'll have more meaning for you. It's like the temple walls kind of speak to you. So welcome to you, those of you guys here. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. The way we start our classes, we start with meditation. So if you guys would like to start with meditation, I'm going to do some chanting to ease into the meditation. This will help you get more benefit out of the meditation itself. If you guys would like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. There's chanting sheets over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself to those and chant along if you'd like. If you're going to chant, it's important to understand that it's not a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that. There's none of those kinds of things in the teachings of the Buddha. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs and then hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, it's about learning, growing, and developing in this life to be able to train your mind and get to the peace and joy that your mind can experience in this life. So when we're doing this chanting, it's helping to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Then you're going to hear me come in with some guidance where I'm going to be guiding you during the meditation, essentially teaching you and instructing you how to meditate while you're actually meditating. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together, everyone here at the temple and anyone who's joining online. And then we'll come out of that with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start today's class, helping you guys to understand the symbolism of the teachings. So I'm going to get started with the chanting, and you guys can make yourself comfortable. Normally, you just kind of sit however is comfortable for you, where it's not painful, but it's not luxurious. I'm just going to do the chanting, and then I'll guide you through the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Otang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang namasami Supatipano mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang samuno Sakato rokavitu Anuttaro purisa Dhamma sati satatava manusra Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. Nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหะเกวาโพตังมหะเกวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหะเกวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหะเกวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตวามนุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone here at the temple. Welcome to everyone online as well. As I was sharing, today's our group learning program, and each Sunday and Wednesday I come together with students here, helping them to build a foundation in the path to enlightenment. Today's class is all about chapter 23, which is Symbolism of Teachings, Reminders Through Imagery. This is where you learn about the artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism that you're going to see throughout Buddhist cultures, and this will actually help you to be able to understand the teachings of the Buddha better. This individual that we refer to as the Buddha, he originates over 2,500 years ago, and he was born in a region that we refer to as Nepal, and he taught in northeast India. That line between Nepal and India didn't exist 2,500 years ago, and he spent time in that region of the world. And when he was teaching, everything that he taught was oral. There wasn't the ability to write things down during his lifetime. The technology to write things down existed in China, but it hadn't made its way to that region of the world yet. So the language that he spoke didn't even have a script to it, because there was no reason to actually have a script, because there was no ability to write things down. So this technology hadn't made its way to that region of the world. Now, you may not see writing something down as technology, but writing things down 2,500 years ago, that was technology. So Siddhartha Gautama, this individual referred to as the Buddha, he used symbols as a way to help his students remember his teachings, that he would teach orally. And then if you had sat in a discourse with him and you understood his teachings, then you could see these different symbols that are used in order to kind of refresh your memory of the teachings. Because that's where it actually, the benefit really comes in with the teachings, that the teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs and then hoping something good happens when you die. It's also not rules and commandments, and it's not rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer. He's helping you to understand wisdom about the world around you, that with this wisdom, you can then improve the way that you interact in the world. You can navigate the world more peacefully with this wisdom, making wiser and wiser decisions as you interact in all your various relationships and various situations. So learning the teachings is one thing, to intellectually understand them, but then you need to reflect on them to independently verify them. And then you need to practice his teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life. So without the ability to write things down, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he used things like chanting, like what we were just doing. He used this chanting as a way to help students commit the teachings to memory. But he also used symbols. And I'm going to introduce you guys to some of the main symbols that you're going to see throughout artwork, architecture, temple construction. And as you go around and see these things, it'll actually have more meaning for you, where you see these different symbols. And as I go in our talk today, I'm going to pause a few times and open up for questions. Whether you guys are here at the temple, have questions, or you're online, you can ask questions if you like. We have microphones in the white bowl here in the middle of the room. All you need to do is get a microphone, and you can bring it back to your seat. There's a gray button on there. You press that and the lights will come on, and you just hold it up to your chin. We'll be able to hear you here at the temple. They'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then you can keep these microphones with you, because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone. And then if you're not using it, if you could turn it off, that'll be helpful so we don't get feedback through the speakers. And then anybody who's online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like. So this first symbol that I'm going to share with you guys, I refer to it as the Na, but some people call it the unilome. This is actually a symbol of enlightenment and your journey to enlightenment, to be able to help you to understand what you're going to experience as you're making your way towards enlightenment. When we talk about enlightenment, what enlightenment is it's a mental state that you acquire in this life, where your mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. You will eliminate all the causes and conditions that are producing things like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this is eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. You can get to the point where the mind's focused, you have concentration, clarity, and deep memory, where you'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming. They're at ease because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile any longer. Oftentimes people think that these kinds of things come from the outside world. You might think that other people are causing you to be angry, but this isn't actually true. And you can independently verify this through the teachings of the Buddha. You can actually uproot the causes and conditions that are producing these feelings and get to the point where the mind's completely peaceful and joyful, to the point where you're not even experiencing a bad mood any longer. So sometimes when we talk about this, and this is what this enlightened mental state is, and you can see your mind gradually moving closer and closer to it in this life. Sometimes people think that getting to enlightenment is kind of like walking through butterflies and rose petals or something like this, or like, walking on a rainbow in clouds to enlightenment. Well, definitely when you get to enlightenment, your mind is completely peaceful and joyful. It doesn't even have the slightest ickiness. But on the way to enlightenment, there's a lot of challenges along the way. And it's not this, direct line like this linear line to enlightenment. So this particular symbol helps you to be able to understand what you're encountering on this path to enlightenment. It originates right here where my pointer is, and then you're going around and around and around. What this is helping you to remember what's called the cycle of rebirth. This is something that the Buddha taught, that beings are continuously being reborn over and over and over again. Right now, you might be believing that you only have one life, but you don't have any evidence that you only have one life. Just right now, you can't remember your previous lives. But if you start training your mind and you lifting the pollution out of your mind, there's a good chance that you might actually experience observation and memories of your previous lives. It might have actually already happened. If you know what déjà vu is, you might have actually started having memories of things that happened in a previous life, and it's something that didn't happen in this life, but it feels so utterly familiar to you. None of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief, including the cycle of rebirth. You can independently verify this. In our book series of 13 books, in volume 11, chapter 105, I have 17 different criteria that help you to be able to independently verify the cycle cycle of rebirth. But it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason, because there are certain teachings you need to learn and understand on your way to getting to that point. But nonetheless, this cycle of rebirth is something that is true reality. It is actually truly happening. And as you're being reborn over and over and over again, you see there's this cyclical effect to this image. And as you're doing that, you can see the image is very wide and it's very dark, because living with anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other feelings, it's very dark. It feels very miserable sometimes when you're experiencing those feelings, grief and sorrow and sadness, guilt, shame, fear. It can be very dark living with that. So that's what this is symbolizing. But slowly but surely, as you start getting on the path to enlightenment, you start coming out of that, and you notice that the path kind of starts to narrow in a little bit. It's not as much darkness. But as you're making your way forward, there's going to be these backward steps. Getting on the path to enlightenment, it isn't like you learn a bunch of things and you snap your fingers and you instantly are able to implement those things. You're going to be making forward progress, but you're going to have missteps too, right? This is a common part of life. This is how you learn, is through your mistakes. And then as you learn from those mistakes, then you make more forward progress. And then you have some more missteps, right? But then you make more forward progress, and then there's some missteps, forward progress and missteps. But notice that it's kind of narrowing in more and more and more and more and more and more, until eventually you get to this point where you've narrowed in on this path so well that the mind is actually enlightened. Now, this is depicting 6 missteps. You're going to have a lot more than 6 missteps on the path to enlightenment, right? You might have 6,000 missteps on the path to enlightenment. That's part of the cultivation of wisdom. But this particular image is oftentimes placed at like the third eye. If you look at a picture of the Buddha in artwork or a statue, they will sometimes draw it on the third eye. He didn't actually have that there during his lifetime. The third eye is in between the eyebrows, and this is a symbol of enlightenment. So they will oftentimes put it like at the third eye on a statue of the Buddha or a picture of the Buddha, symbolizing that he's enlightened. But you'll see it in other places too. And you can remember what this means is that cycle of rebirth, being reborn over and over and over again, coming out of that darkness, narrowing in on the teachings that it takes to get to enlightenment, having those missteps, but learning from those, and now continuing forward and making forward progress. Now more missteps, but learning from those and just narrowing in more and more until you get to the point where the mind's actually enlightened. Now, one of the things that I did, because this is a very common symbol, this one that you see here that I'm showing you, as I did some searching and looking around for other images, because as we know, artists are very creative and they come up with all kinds of different artwork. And it's not just this symbol that represents that. So that's what these two over on the sides are. These are other symbols that are very similar, and they're based in a similar concept, but they're just different, right? Because there's not just one way to do things. That would be permanence. So these are just kind of other artists rendering this same kind of thing, and you can see it's very similar in nature, and it's a symbol of enlightenment. So do you guys have any questions on this symbol here? No questions? You can also ask questions about the teachings that I'm sharing with you as well from the Buddha. And for those of you guys online, remember you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Let me just see if we have anything online here. Okay, I don't see any questions. Okay, so let's go to the next symbol. This one, we refer to it as the Dhamma wheel. The word Dhamma is a Pali word. That's the historical language that captures the original teachings of the Buddha. This word Dhamma means teachings, but if I called this teachings wheel, it kind of sounds a little bit odd. So I still use this phrase Dhamma wheel. So this Dhamma wheel is a reminder for people of a core central teaching of the Buddha. So I'll share with you guys what this is. So this circle here is once again reminding you of the circle, the cycle of rebirth. And then these 8 individual spokes, this is reminding you of the core central teaching of the Buddha. The core central teaching is called the Eightfold Path. This is the path to enlightenment, where he lays out the entire training that you need to do for the mind in order to move it to this enlightened mental state. So if you had sat in a discourse with the Buddha and you had learned this Eightfold Path, and then you saw this symbol, say, on the side of a barn somewhere, it would remind you of his teachings. It would bring it to the forefront of your mind, and now you can be more easily able to practice that particular teaching. So here, if you're familiar with the Eightfold Path at all, this 12 o'clock position represents the right view. Then this is right intention. The 3 o'clock position is representing right speech. This is representing right action. This is right livelihood. This is right effort. This 9 o'clock position is right mindfulness. And then this is right concentration. So if you understood the Eightfold Path, you would understand that this is the cycle of rebirth. This is representing the Eightfold Path, and you would understand what each one of those teachings are. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you escape out of this cycle of rebirth, getting to the point where the mind is enlightened. Now, while this is a Dhamma wheel and it's representing what I just described, there's other types over here too, where you can just see this is kind of more cartoonish, and you see this in different artwork as well. While this is a Dhamma wheel and it's representing the things that I shared, it's functioning as what's called a temple marker. In each temple complex, there's typically one main building, and we call that the main hall in English. But in Thai, we refer to it as the sala. And this sala, or this main hall, will typically have 8 markers around the outside of the building. And this is the 8 markers that are in the 8 directions of the compass. So the north, south, east, west, and you have northeast, you have southeast, southwest, and northwest. And what would have happened is at one point the land would have been just raw land, and they would have dug deep down into the earth, and they would have dropped these big concrete balls down into the earth and marking out the 8 directions of the compass. And then once they build the building, they would have put these markers on the outside, and each temple complex is different. This particular temple, they had this particular type of marker, but every temple you go to, they'll have different types of markers, but it's similar in nature that you'll see it around the main building. And what this serves as is, like, let's just say something happened to that building and it got destroyed. Well, those big concrete balls under the ground would let the people know 200 years later, 300 years later, this is where the main hall was. And there's 8 in the directions of the compass, but then there's a 9th one in the middle of the floor. They don't put a marker there because it's in the middle of the floor of the main building, but they put a ball down deep in the earth. And then the other thing that this serves as is, like, let's just say you're going to a temple. One of your friends invites you to a temple, and they're like, hey, would you like to come to this temple? We're having a big event this weekend. They're like, yeah, sure, I'll meet you there. What time is it? Oh, it's on Sunday at 9 a.m., right? So now you're headed to this temple. You've never been there before. Maybe it's a big, huge complex with lots of land, and you show up and you have no idea where to go. Well, if you walk around the temple complex, you'll be able to find the building that has these markers, and then you'll know that that's where the main event is typically held, in the main building. So that's what these markers serve as. But this is serving to help you remember the cycle of rebirth in the Eightfold Path. Here, in this particular situation, you see me talking with a student, and there's a Dhamma wheel back here behind this statue, because this Dhamma wheel is typically placed behind the head of a Buddha. So here you see it at this particular statue. And if you go to our main sala here, our main hall, there's a main Buddha image, and it's actually painted on the wall behind the head of the statue, the main statue. The reason why is because it's said that when a Buddha awakens to enlightenment, that they reach up with their hand and they turn this Dhamma wheel counterclockwise. This Dhamma wheel isn't literally on the head of a Buddha, but figuratively it's there. That where the skull is and the back of the skull comes together, there's a flat spot, and they reach up with their hand and they turn this wheel counterclockwise when they get to enlightenment. It's a symbol of humanity stepping forward and entering into a new era. Because when a Buddha awakens and is in the world, that's the best time to exist in the world, because now the teachings can really shine, and they're really shining in the world, because that individual who got to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides, that's what a Buddha does, that they would be able to share the teachings in a very profound way that's going to help countless people. So this Dhamma wheel, while it represents the cycle of rebirth and the Eightfold Path, it's thought to be on the head of a Buddha. And now when they turn that Dhamma wheel, they're symbolizing that humanity has now stepped forward into this new era where now the teachings can shine brightly in the world and be accessible for countless people. So do you guys have questions on this Dhamma wheel? Anything you'd like to ask, or any of the teachings that I was sharing? Looks like Marcy has a question online. Go ahead, Marcy.
Thank you, Teacher David. My question was just very simple. What did you call that first image? What was it called again?
I call it a na, but most people, I think, probably call it a unilome. This
Okay.
one here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have anything else. All right, I don't see any other questions. So now let's talk about lotus flowers, because you're going to see plenty of lotus flowers in Buddhist culture. If you go around, you're going to see them everywhere. And that's because a lotus flower actually grows and develops in the same way that a human being grows and develops on the path to enlightenment. That a lotus flower has roots that are deep down into the earth, and it's holding on to the earth really tightly. And it's usually growing in a murky pond. And then it grows this strong stalk coming through the murky water, and then it rises above the water and it blooms into a lotus flower. So whenever you see a bloom lotus flower, this is symbolizing enlightenment. So you usually see this carved at the base of a statue of the Buddha, or you'll see that they'll have bloom lotus flowers all around him. This is symbolizing a person's journey to enlightenment as well, because an individual who's in the unenlightened state, their mind is holding on to the world. They're holding on to things, craving permanence while you live in an impermanent world. And then you're going to need to grow this strong practice, this strong amount of wisdom to grow through the murkiness of the world. Because the world is killing, stealing, having sexual misconduct, lying, taking substances that cause heedlessness. You're going to need to have wisdom to grow through that, have a strong practice, right? And then when you rise above the water, you bloom into a lotus flower. And even though we use this kind of analogy, it's not like you're above other people. There's none of that in the teachings of the Buddha. You don't have this pecking order of who's above others and so forth. You're training your mind to not do that, because that's what the unenlightened mind does, is it tends to judge people, putting yourself above people and looking down on them, or you'll put yourself below people and you'll look up to them and you'll be all shaken up when you're in that situation. And the Buddha is teaching you how to eliminate that from your mind. So while we use this analogy that you're rising above the murky water of the world and you're blooming, you shouldn't think about it as you're above other people. And just like, impermanence affects all things, it affects lotus flowers too, because some flowers will bloom like this, but other flowers won't. They'll just stay closed like this. So whenever you see a closed lotus flower, this is representing your potential to get to enlightenment, that you haven't gotten to enlightenment yet, but you have the potential to do so. So usually around the Buddha, you'll see a lot of open lotus flowers, but then in other places, you see a lot of closed lotus flowers, reminding you that you have the potential to get to enlightenment. And one of the things that the Buddha shares with you is that in this human realm, this is essentially the ideal existence, because you tend to have built-in motivation to get to enlightenment, because you don't like those painful feelings. You don't like the anger, the sadness, the frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. These feelings are very painful sometimes to experience. So you kind of have built-in motivation to be able to make your way to enlightenment. So the Buddha teaches you not to allow this life to go to waste, because to be able to get here into the human realm, you would have needed to do many wholesome things in the past to be able to get to this point of the human realm. And now that you're here, you have the full capability to train your mind to be able to make your way to this enlightened mental state. So it's important not to be complacent, be dedicated and diligent to your own personal growth and your own personal development. That's one of the ways you can think about the teachings of the Buddha. I don't think about it like a religion, and it really depends on how you think about a religion. But if you think about one person at the top telling everybody else what to do, if you think about rules and commandments, if you think about rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer, and that's how you think about religion, the Buddhist teachings actually don't have any of those things whatsoever. There's not one person sitting at the top telling everybody else what to do. There aren't any rules and commandments. You will never get to enlightenment following rules. And there aren't rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer. If you've seen these kinds of things associated with the teachings of the Buddha, those are gross misunderstandings of his teachings. He taught you to actually train your mind, uproot certain pollutions that are in the mind, and that's what's actually producing the enlightened mental state. So the Buddha teaches you not to allow this life to go to waste, and use that potential that you have to be able to have dedication and diligence to your own growth and development. This is like a self-help program where you're learning and growing and developing in a progression of life, becoming a better and better person. The Buddha never said, I discovered a new religion, right? He said, I discovered a better way of life, and here's that better way of life. And he never tried to guilt, shame, or fear people into doing that. He never tried to convince people to do it. He had already got to peace and joy. He was just spending his life helping people understand what it took for him to get to that mental state. And if people were interested in doing that, then they would have the ability to do that and learn from him he did it. And that's what he did for his life from the age of 35 to 80, is he shared what it took for him to get to that enlightened mental state. So this closed lotus flower is symbolizing your potential that you have to be able to get to enlightenment. So do you guys have any questions on this? Yes, sir. Yeah, feel free to get a microphone. They're Buddhist microphones. You need to be patient with them.
I do have one question, and you said because lotus is like a very pure, very purified image, and it grows from the murky mud, the dirtiness of everything, and in my opinion, I think they coexist. The dirtiness and the purity, they coexist. If everything is purified, then there's no dirt, there's nothing dirty, right? So you said in Buddhism, there's we all want the enlightenment, but the enlightenment actually grows from the dirtiness, from jealousy, from everything that we feel painful about, right?
I didn't say that.
Okay. Like,
do you have a question for me?
Yes. And my question is, how in Buddhism, how do you explain, or how does Buddhism explain, like, how do you see those dirtiness?
Okay.
Because they must exist.
It doesn't have to exist. So we don't think of things as good and bad or right and wrong. That's not what an enlightened mind is thinking. That's the way an unenlightened mind will typically think, that there's this one way to do things and that's the right way and everything else is wrong. And of course, the way the unenlightened mind thinks is my way is the right way and everybody else's way is the wrong way. Instead, you just understand that coming into this world as a being, that and you can independently verify this, that we come into the world with certain pollutions in the mind, and now those pollutions are motivating unskillful conduct. And if you purify your mind of those pollutions, you'll be able to see that your decision making improves and the quality of your mind is improving. So the quality of your mind in your life is improving as you're purifying the mind. But you don't have to have this, what you're referring to as dirtiness, in order to have purity. But in order for a being to get to enlightenment, they will have experienced these pollutions. And now, having experienced those pollutions and knowing what anger and sadness and frustration, what all that leads to, which is difficulties and struggles in your life, now you can transcend that and you can get to this higher consciousness where you're no longer experiencing that. And you don't need to keep experiencing it over and over and over again in order to transcend it. Mm-hmm. You got it?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So let me see if there's any other questions. I don't see any other questions. Okay. So now, one of the things I did in this chapter, and I do here in this discussion, is I went out and found a image that I didn't teach about, right? Like I didn't teach you what this is. This is a combination of two images that I actually taught you. So if you understand the basics of what I'm teaching you about this imagery, one of the fun things is you go look at artwork that I haven't taught you about and you haven't learned about. And now you can kind of interpret and decipher what it is that you're actually seeing. So you can obviously see here that this is a combination of the one that I taught you, which is the unilome or the na, and then there's the lotus flower, right? So we can look at this and we can say, this means enlightenment. That's what the artist is trying to communicate. You can speak the language of the artist. And now when you go to the temples, you see artwork, it kind of speaks to you, right? So that's what you're doing here, is you're cultivating this wisdom about what these things mean, but understanding that I'm not teaching you every single symbol that exists, but with the basics, you can actually put this together and kind of figure these things out. Because artists are always very creative, and this is an artist that would have created this and combined the lotus flower in this unilome or this na together, and now we can see like, oh yeah, they're trying to communicate enlightenment if this was in a certain place, right? So now there's this particular image, which you guys will see quite a bit if you've been to temples, this big snake. I will explain to you the story of this snake and then I'll explain to you the lessons that you can learn from it. Because I don't know that this story is true, but I don't know that it's false either because I wasn't there. It sounds a little bit outlandish to me. And the way that these teachings work is that, whenever you have someone as significant as the Buddha that existed over 2,500 years ago, and they write down his teachings, it would be naive for us to think that whatever they wrote down 2,500 years ago is exactly the same things that the Buddha taught. And now that document is exactly the same 2,500 years later. Due to impermanence and constant change, we know that not everything that the Buddha taught is in his original teachings. We call this the Pali Canon, 45 volumes of books that are this thick. We know everything he taught is not in those books. And we also know that everything that's in those books is not what the Buddha actually taught, right? Because 2,500 years of history, it couldn't have stayed the same all this time. So there is a story in the original teachings, in the original Pali Canon, that relates to this particular image that you'll see at a lot of temples. And I'll explain to you what that story is, and then I will extrapolate the lessons from it so that you can really understand what this is communicating for you so that it'll have meaning and it'll help you. So there's a story that there's this large snake that existed during the lifetime of the Buddha. And this large snake was very close to being reborn in the human realm. And because of that, it could transition itself to look like a human being. And what it would do is it would make itself look like a monk with a robe and shaved head and looking like a human being. And it would go into the places where the Buddha was teaching. And the Buddha would be teaching hundreds and hundreds of people at one time. And as he was teaching, oftentimes he would teach for very long periods of time. And people would fall asleep. And you guys might consider that to be disrespectful if somebody dozed off or fell asleep, but the Buddha understood that people's minds are working really hard to be able to understand his teachings, and he was teaching for a very long period of time. So as people would fall asleep, and a lot of people were asleep, he would just wait patiently for people to wake up, and then when they woke up, he would just start teaching again. So as all these people started falling asleep, and this being was in there looking like a ordained practitioner as a monk, and they were all falling asleep, as this being was asleep, it lost its consciousness and it's transitioned to look back like a snake. And now, slowly but surely, as the ordained practitioners were waking up, they saw this big snake amongst them. And when they saw this big snake amongst them, they got scared and they got fearful. And they went and got the Buddha, because an enlightened being doesn't have any fear. So they went and got the Buddha, and the Buddha came over there to where they were at, and this snake was just waking up. And the Buddha says to the snake, hey, what are you doing? Why are you here? And the snake's like, I want to get to enlightenment. I want to get to enlightenment. I want to learn your teachings and get to enlightenment. And the Buddha's like, you can't get to enlightenment. You're in the animal realm. It's not possible for you to be able to get to enlightenment. You need to be in the human realm or the heavenly realm in order to be able to get to enlightenment. And the snake's like, no, I want to get to enlightenment now. I want to do this now. And da-da-da-da-da. And the Buddha's like, yes, I understand, but it's not possible for you to get to enlightenment. And I need to ask you to leave because all of these human beings that I'm trying to teach, they're not enlightened yet and they're fearful. And if you're still here, they're going to have this fear and I'm not going to be able to teach them. So could you go out? Could you leave? And the snake's like, okay, if you're not going to let me learn, I'll leave. I'll go outside, but I'm going to stand outside and I'm going to stand guard. And if anybody tries to come in to where you're teaching and they have ill will towards your teachings, I'm not going to let them pass by. I'm not going to let them come into where you're teaching. So that's why you see these snakes at the base of the stairs of a temple, because it's standing guard, making sure that people that don't have ill will come into the temple. Okay, so this is the story, all right? Whether this is true or false, I don't know. I wasn't there. It doesn't sound like it was true to me because I've never seen a snake that can transition itself to look like a human being. And I've never seen a human being that can transition itself to look like a snake. Unless one of you guys do something miraculous here, I've never seen that before, right? But the scientists do tell us that 99% of animals that once existed don't exist any longer. The animals that we see represent only 1% of the animals that exist in the world. So who's to know, right? We weren't there 2,500 years ago. But nonetheless, there's these lessons that are embedded in the story, and that's what's important. So when you see this snake at the base of stairs, and you'll see this at many temples, and you'll see this in artwork, the first thing that it can remind you is thank goodness you're human, because you can actually get to enlightenment. As an animal, you can't get to enlightenment, right? The next thing it can remind you of is to understand that enlightened beings don't have fear. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will have eliminated all the fear, even the fear of death. You won't even have that fear by the time you get to enlightenment. And then the third thing it can remind you of is whenever you come to learn the teachings of the Buddha, you would like to not have ill will towards the teachings of the Buddha. Having ill will towards his teachings would be to be interested in changing them or modifying them. If you tried to change or modify the teachings of the Buddha, it's going to cause harm to you and countless other people. The Buddha talks about this in his teachings, because what a Buddha does is they spend their life illuminating the path to enlightenment so people can see it very clearly of what it takes to get to enlightenment. So if you change the teachings of the Buddha, it's like knocking over those lights and the people behind you can't see where the path is of how to get to enlightenment. So if you ever come to the temple to learn like this, you're interested in learning the teachings, asking questions rather than trying to change his teachings or modify them in any way, because then you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. And anybody that you share that content with is going to hinder them from getting to enlightenment too. That's why it causes you harm and the harm of countless people. So these are the 3 lessons that you can learn. Thank goodness you're human. Enlightened beings don't have fear. And it's important not to have ill will towards the teachings of the Buddha and being interested in changing them. So do you guys have questions on this one here? I was just looking at this one. This is my little son right here. He's not that small anymore. He's 13. I was just looking. No questions? All right. Looks like maybe Marcy has a question. Let's see. Go ahead, Marcy.
You, Teacher David. So when you discuss the unilome and that downward slope, right now, this being Marcy is experiencing some of that little downward slope, right? But what I've noticed is that the mind at this point seems to my meditation practice is pretty solid, but I find that the mind, when I'm experiencing that downward slope, it immediately goes back to, okay, let's dig into the books. And I'm just wondering, is that normal? Is that the mind understanding that you need to, how would I say, need more deep understanding of the teachings in order to come out of that downward slope at this point in time?
Yeah, if you're noticing that you're going in a downward direction with your practice, this is because the mind is not yet in the first stage of enlightenment, because once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, there won't be any regression backwards from that point forward. So anytime your mind is regressing, it's because there's some lack of wisdom that's in the mind, that there's some wisdom that you don't have right now. And there can be complacency in the mind too, where there's a lack of determination, dedication, and diligence. So you need to look in your practice to be able to see what is it that you're lacking in. And that's where sometimes you can consult with a teacher if you need personal guidance or something like that. You can schedule appointments. I think you just recently scheduled one, if I remember correctly, where you can sit down and you can talk, and now we can walk through what are the things you've been encountering, what are the things you've been up to, and then you can figure out for yourself what is the areas of your practice that need more support and what is that wisdom that is lacking. Because anytime a being is having struggles or difficulties in the world, it's just that there's some wisdom that is lacking.
I think that that's a very wise thing to do. Yeah, because I'm having a hard time grasping, producing wholesome karma, right? So practicing generosity, doing meditation, seeing the interest of all beings be well. But I am experiencing times where it almost appears as though I'm receiving unwholesome karma and I'm having difficulty. So I think I'm going to be in your schedule again, Teacher David.
Yeah, no worries. Just schedule something and then I'll sit down and meet with you and I'll help you out.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so let's go to the next one. This is the last one, actually. This is also a symbol of enlightenment. In that area that we talk about where the Buddha lived his life and Nepal and Northeast India, there's a tree there that is attributed to where the Buddha actually attained enlightenment. But in reality, he attained enlightenment over a 6-year period. But there's a tree where he hung out for 7 weeks after he got to enlightenment, contemplating whether or not he should share his teachings or not. Sometimes people think that he actually got to enlightenment at this tree, but he actually got to enlightenment over a 6-year period. It's not like he sat under this tree, meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. It's not actually true. What actually occurred is that when he was getting ready to die, he knew 3 months before he was going to die, and he was informing his students, and he's let them know, like, hey, I'm going to be dying in 3 months. This is how enlightened he was, that he knew exactly when he was going to die. And he shared with his students that he was going to die. And his students said, well, if you're going to die, what are we going to do when all these people are showing up to come visit you, right? Because 2,500 years ago, they couldn't send out an email to inform everybody that he was going to die or that he was dead, right? They couldn't put a Facebook post out that said, hey, by the way, the Buddha's dead, no need to come to see him. So there was all these people, these tons and tons of people that had interacted with him and were learning from him, and they would come to visit him regularly in order to get teachings, right? So once he died, these people are going to still be showing up, and his core students are like, what are we supposed to do when these people are coming? And the Buddha said, well, if these people are coming, there's 4 places that they can visit to arise dedication. The place where I was born, the place where I got to enlightenment, the place where I delivered my first talk, and the place where I die. These are the 4 sites that you can go visit and actually arise dedication. So he attributed this tree to where he attained enlightenment, even though he did that over a 6-year period. So a lot of people think that he sat under this tree, he meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. And this isn't actually true. If you see his actual teachings, he talks about this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. But nonetheless, he did hang out at this tree for 7 weeks, contemplating whether or not to share his teachings, because his teachings were radically different than anything that was happening at the time. At the time, they thought the way to get to enlightenment was to cause physical pain to the body. And if your mind could overcome that physical pain, that you would then be able to get to enlightenment. So they were hanging themselves upside down from trees, laying on beds of nails, starving their body with metal or piercing their body with metal implements, starving their body, not eating certain food. And they thought that if they could overcome that pain, that they would get to enlightenment. But his teachings didn't include any of that stuff. His was all about training the mind. So that's why he wasn't sure if the world was really truly ready for what it was that he had to share with them. So he sat at this tree, and of course he interacted with people during that period of time. It wasn't like 7 solid weeks just sitting in one spot, but he was at this tree kind of hanging out, trying to decide what he was going to do and whether or not he would share his teachings. Well, we know what the end of the story is, that he did decide to share his teachings, but nonetheless, he hung out at this tree for a period of time, and that's why this tree is considered to be a symbol of enlightenment as well. And the shape of this leaf is a very unique shape, that here you can see the way it's shaped, and it has this little curly thing here. In English, we refer to this as a Bodhi tree. And you can actually see this in Northeast India if you go to visit it. But also, we have this tree actually in this temple. When you go to the front gate and you're leaving out of the front gate, there's one of these trees there. And if you look down on the ground, you'll actually see the leaves of this tree. A really beautiful leaf. And there's other trees like that around in Thailand that people kind of have this tree around. So this leaf of this tree is a symbol of enlightenment. And you'll see it in different artwork and different places. You'll see people using this shape of the leaf as a symbol of enlightenment. And now you'll know what it actually means. So any questions on this particular symbol? No questions? Okay. So what I'm going to do then is just end class by thanking you for you guys to join. I appreciate your interest to learn the teachings of the Buddha. Thank you for everyone online as well. If you guys would like to learn more, there's plenty of opportunities for you to do that. On Wednesday, I'm going to be here at 9 a.m. I'm going to be doing loving kindness meditation with students. This is actually help you to rewire your mind to be more loving and kind, where you have a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, active goodwill towards others. It actually eliminates your anger, hatred, and ill will. And all all the lesser versions like frustration, agitation, annoyance, even the slightest dislike towards others. Again, people think that it's other people that are causing these feelings to arise, but through the teachings of the Buddha, if you learn them deep enough, you can see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, and you can actually eliminate them. And this meditation is an important component of that, to be able to help you rewire your mind to be loving and kind, so that then you can go out into the world and be loving and kind through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. It also helps you to eliminate any negative self-talk or inner dialogue where you maybe are degrading or diminishing yourself, because sometimes people have that inside their mind, that self-talk where they're degrading and diminishing their self. And you don't actually have to walk around with that. You can actually completely transform that. And this meditation is an important component of that. So I'm going to be doing that meditation with students on Wednesday morning, and then I'm going to teach you guys a little bit of the teachings of the Buddha, and then I'll just open up to any and all questions that you guys have. On Fridays at 6 p.m., we have a social event here where students come in and new people come in, and we just hang out and have like a little party. We have music playing. We have a social event. People bring snacks sometimes. We have games that we play. Sometimes we show movies. So if you guys would like to come by at 6 o'clock, you'll meet a lot of wholesome people that are into wholesome things. You guys can hang out. And then, of course, on Saturdays and Sundays, we have our regular classes there as well. And then there's various courses and retreats throughout the month and throughout the year that you can see on our bulletin board. And you can see it on our website as well. We have an events calendar, and all of our programs, we teach them here, but they're also live streamed, so you can join from anywhere in the world. And if you can't attend live, you can watch the recordings as well. So if you guys are interested in getting rid of your anger, your bitterness, your hostility, your frustration, there's a path for you here, and it's available for you at no cost. All the books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, even personal guidance, you can get help for this. So if you'd like to get plugged into the resources to help you, you can let me know and I'll get you plugged into those, so that way you can start learning and growing and developing, and you can see the truth for yourself that these teachings actually work to improve the condition of your mind. So whatever you guys choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.